Today I'm taking a look at just about every Tier 8 premium in World of Tanks and ranking them about how they stack up in the Frontline game mode. My name's LadPad and welcome to the video. A really quick caveat, I am ranking these tanks off of how they perform in Frontline. I don't care about how they do at Tier 10, I don't care about how they wall up Tier 6s, this is purely based off the Frontline game mode. If you're not aware, Frontline is a game mode that pops up every few months and it's 30 versus 30. You have a huge sprawling map and your goal is to cap some objectives and then destroy some objectives at the very end, or if you're on defense, you need to stop the opponents from doing that. What's also really important to remember is that these maps are huge, and so in this particular scenario, having a lot of mobility is much more important than it is in the regular game. Mobility is always good. In this game mode, it is vital. And so slow tanks that may be really good in the random queue may not place very well in this particular video because this is based off of Frontline. It's also important to realize that Frontline is almost all about making credits. I'm not including any tech tree tanks in this video because people play Frontline to grind credits. A few people might hop in some of their favorite Tier 8 tanks, tech tree tanks, just for the fun of that, and that's great for you, but I'm not going to rank them. Some people also might be grinding some XP, and I do that every now and then as well, but I'm not going to rank those tanks in this video. And so, with that said, our Frontline ranking begins now. We're starting off with probably the most controversial tank in this tier list. This is the BZ-176, and it's really powerful. You could have a strong argument to say that this is the strongest Tier 8 premium tank in the game, in the random queue. However, it's got a few downsides in this mode that really sets it apart. One thing you need to know about Frontline is there are a lot of long-range engagements, and the BZ-176 has slow shell velocity and it has terrible accuracy. Compile that with, even though it has rocket boosters, that allows it to get into place very quickly. You don't get to use those all the time, you have a very limited amount. So what you need to know is that even though you can resupply your rocket boost in a supply depot, those are spread out across the map. And so by and large, the BZ-176 is going to be a very slow tank that's bad at range. And so in Frontline specifically, it is slow. It can't shoot very well at range. And those are two major drawbacks that are vital for this particular game mode. As such, I'm going to put this in great in most places. If you're on a cap, if you're in one of the city portions of the three maps, this thing can do a lot of damage. It's great at holding a particular spot, but in terms of progressing the fight, it's not the best choice, and heavy tanks in general have an indirect nerf based off of the map. And so I'm going to keep the BZ-176 in great in most places. The WZ-111, there are far better choices in this mode. I don't think it's the worst thing. You've got a fair amount of health, penetration. The penetration on the WZ is a little poor, but it doesn't matter because you're only fighting Tier 8s. So while this is probably better in Frontline than it would be in the random queue, it's still not a good choice, and so I'll put it in bad. The WZ-1112 or the 112 is, I'm going to say for this list and this purpose, identical to the WZ-111, and it's just not a great choice. You could have much better options. It's got pretty good armor, but that's not going to matter because in this game mode, you need accuracy and mobility, and the WZ-112 has neither. The 122 TM. This tank has very good armor for a medium tank. Its mobility is okay, but its damage per minute, its DPM is so poor that although this might be a lot more effective in the random queue, I think rate of fire and DPM is so important in this game mode that this knocks it from being somewhere in between great in some spots and a decent alternative. I can see you side scraping really well on this thing and abusing some of the more mobile mediums, so I'll keep it in great in some spots, but it's going to be towards the bottom of this list. The 59 Patton, this is something you should never play. It's a bad tank in the random queue, it's bad in Frontlines. There's no reason you would ever play this tank, and so I'm sticking it and never play it. You can't even get good stats on it because you don't track stats in Frontline, so it's just always a bad option. The T-34-3 has decent mobility, it's got some armor, its penetration is really lackluster, but it doesn't really matter in Frontline. However, because it's poor at range, I'm going to say this is towards the bottom of the decent alternatives. You could get use out of it, you could grind credits, but it's not a great choice. Compound that with the Type 59. The Type 59 has less alpha damage, but actually is going to be much better at range, and so I'm going to put it over the T-34-3. I still don't think it's a great tank, but it's very useful in this situation. The M41D, a light tank. Light tanks, by and large, are going to be up a little higher because they have mobility. And with your mobility, you can do so many things. You can get into the back line of your opponents. You can rush towards and shoot objectives when certain points unlock. So light tanks are generally powerful in the sense that their mobility helps them do a lot. But having a P shooter as a gun and almost no alpha damage really does knock the M41D. And so it's going at the bottom of the decent alternatives. And this is where most light tanks are going to end up. The WZ-121FT. A lot of people don't think about this tank. It's kind of under the radar, but it's got a really phenomenal gun. Its accuracy is poor, but its mobility is good, its armor is good, and it's got fantastic damage per minute. And so this is a case where I think tank destroyers can suffer in this game mode. I think the WZ-120FT deserves to be great in most places, towards the bottom, but still a fantastic choice in a lot of different scenarios because the gun is so good. Yes, you'll miss shots, but you're going to be shooting so many times that matters just a little bit less. The Skoda T27 is a pretty good tank. It is just completely overshadowed by the Progetto, which we will talk about later on. It's got a 3-round mag. You can do 720 alpha damage in about 3.6 seconds. This is not a terrible tank, but it's not a great one either, and so I'm going to throw this into the middle of the decent alternatives. However, all of the other Czech vehicles are phenomenal. The Skoda T56 is going to end up in a similar boat to the BZ-176. It's a heavy tank. It's got great alpha damage, especially when you're unloading the clip. However, something that this tank has that the BZ-176 doesn't is that you are able to shoot at range. The BZ has terrible shell velocity. The Skoda is slightly better and definitely more accurate. This just makes the gun a lot more effective at ranges at 400, 450 meters. And while it's not a great gun for those engagements, it's a usable one. And you get very good turret armor, you get some gun depression, and this makes this, I think, perhaps the best all-rounder in the Frontline game mode for the heavy tanks. Yes, there are better options than it, but if you're looking for a heavy tank that can do a lot of different things, I think the Skoda T56 is an excellent option. However, its brethren, its tank destroyer brethren, the SHPTK TVP 100, the Shrek tank is just better. This has arguably the best gun in the entire Tier 8 game. It has amazing damage per minute, and when you load in HE, you're doing 420 alpha damage every 4 seconds. And for those who don't want to do math in their heads, that's about 6,000 damage per minute against lightly armored targets. There are a ton of Scorpions. There are a ton of SE-130 PMs. There's a fair amount of light tanks in Frontline, which means the Shrek shreds different tanks all around. And it makes it, I think, one of the top 2 tanks in this entire game mode. I'm putting it in the completely overpowered tier because it is just that good. Now that we're done with our Czech tanks, let's take a look at the French. The Liberté is a decent alternative. It's kind of an all-rounder tank. It's not awful at any one thing, but it's not really great at anything either. It lacks the ceiling that some of the better tanks have, but it's nowhere near as bad as some of the others below it. It's got decent penetration, decent alpha damage, decent armor, and so it goes smack in the middle of the decent alternatives. The Smua SM, on the other hand, has something that's really notable. It has a 5-clip autoloader, and you can spit out those shells every 2.2 seconds. And so, while having a big mag is a lot of times a downside in Frontline, if you're taking a huge amount of time loading in your clip, you're going to miss multiple opportunities to fire your gun. The Smua just does something so well that it absolutely belongs in great in some spots. This is not my go-to heavy tank, but I think you can get a lot of value out of it. And 1500 damage in just around 8-9 seconds is really good. And it makes it a really powerful and scary tank to deal with in the game. The FCM 50T, this used to be considered a very good tank about a decade ago. Nowadays, it's just bad. And if we're being honest, I don't think there's a reason you would ever play this tank. It's better than a 59 Patton, but not much else. Similarly, the CDC was one of my all-time favorite tanks back in the day. It had mobility, and it really stood out compared to its counterparts back then. Nowadays, the CDC is just an awful has-been, and it's worse than even the FCM 50T. The Lorraine 40T, this tank is pretty good. It has a lot of the downsides of the Smua SM. in that it's got a long clip. It takes a long time to load in your 4-round mag, but you're able to spit out those shells, and you've got more mobility than the Samua SM. I think there are better tanks for putting in clip damage with mobility than the Lorraine, so I'm going to put it lower than the Samua, but still a great tank in some spots. The M4A1 Revelarice is bad. Awful hull armor, awful turret armor. Its gun hits for 390 alpha, which is not special anymore, and so this is just a tank you should never ever play. The Barask, it's the best. Straight in the S tier, completely overpowered. This is the best tank in the game in Frontline. It has phenomenal mobility. It has burst damage. You get to do 720 damage in 2 seconds. It is amazing. You have camo to work around with, and while the gun isn't accurate at long range, it is usable. Compile that with excellent shell velocity, and this just lets you do so many things all the time, all over the place. If you have a Barask, or I'll throw in the Mule, which is an identical copy to this tank, it's the best. You absolutely want to have it. It has no competition whatsoever in this game mode, and I would absolutely encourage playing the Barask as often as you can if you want to make a ton of credits. You can even in this game mode flank around, intuition swap to a regular mag, and you can pop in 720 alpha damage into your opponents with a really cheap mag instead of the normal APCR gold rounds that you're normally firing. The Alt Proto AMX 30, this is an all-around medium tank. It doesn't do anything incredibly well, but it's pretty good all around. And so it's actually, I think, a better all-rounder than a Type 59, and so I'm going to stick it in grade in some spots because you've got mobility to move around, an instant buff for this tank, but it's not going to do anything incredibly or exceptionally well to stand out from its peers. The ELC Even 90 is the best Tier 8 light tank in the game, and it doesn't really have any competition because it's a phenomenal scout. However, in this game mode, you have spawning planes, and so the need for spotting itself is greatly diminished, and because of that, the lackluster firepower of the ELC Even 90 really holds it back. You can make it work in a lot of different scenarios. I'm sure you can find some bushes that are completely overpowered on a variety of maps, but in all honesty, the pace of the combat moves so quickly, and you have to be firing your gun if you want to become general in a lot of these games, that it's just going to be stuck in decent alternatives. The EBR 75 FL10. This is where I'm on a bit of a shaky grounds because I don't own an EBR 75 FL10. It's the last tank that I desperately want in World of Tanks, and I'll have to pick it up someday if Wargaming ever offers to sell it. With that said, I did play the EBR 90 back in the day when World of Tanks, when Wargaming decided that Frontline should be expanded to Tier 9. And that tank was so good because it was so much faster than everything else. The ability on a few different scenarios, in a few different game cases, to get behind your opponents is devastating. And the EBR 75 FL10 has a 2-shot auto loader that allows you to put in the shells quickly and then get out of dodge. It's a really powerful ability, and I think perhaps the most important thing with an EBR 75 FL10, if you're on offense and you push through one flank, you can then get to the objectives on the other side of the map before anybody in the enemy team is able to deal with you. And if they spawn on you, you've now spawned a few tanks completely out of the fight entirely, and you've probably done some damage to their objectives, and you can nope out of there very quickly. This is one of the best objective destroyers in the game, along with the Barask, and so it's an S tier. It's the best light tank in this game mode, I think, probably by far, and so I'm going to move it right into S tier, right with the TVP 100 and the Barask. The AMX CDA 105, this is a bit of an all-rounder tank destroyer. It doesn't have an amazing gun, but it's got a decent one. It doesn't have an amazing chassis, but it's okay. And so this is going to go into about the bottom of decent alternatives. There are many better tanks to play, but this one will get the job done if it's the one you own. The VK7501K, this thing is slow, and slow tanks are bad. You absolutely could make this work in a few different scenarios. Perhaps if you're defending one specific point, hitting for 490 alpha is very useful, but slow tanks on Frontline just can't push the pace of the combat, and you can't keep up if you win an offensive against your opponents. So if you're on offense, this thing does really poorly, and if you're on defense, it can hold a point really well, but if enemy players aren't pushing into you, you're just going to be sitting there doing nothing. You're losing chances to get damage out, you're losing chances to get extra credits, and it makes it a bad tank. The Malwarbreaker suffers from all the same downsides of the VK, but lacks the 490 alpha damage or the consistent side scraping ability because of its awful weak point on top, and so this makes it a never play it candidate. The Low, still slow. However, it's got a nice accurate gun, which you can use at range, and the ability to play hold down in different scenarios is very useful. And so, while it's not bad or awful, it's not a great tank either because it's so slow, and it's going right into the middle of decent choices. The E75 TS is very similar to the Low, but it actually has, I believe, a little bit more mobility, and you can play it a bit more like a medium tank. And because of that, it's going to go right around the 122 TM in the grade in some spots, because you can use your armor and its well-rounded nature to do a little bit more than a Low ever could. The Panther 8.8 CM has a very nice gun, quite good damage per minute. However, the hull and the mobility is really lackluster. The armor is pathetic. The mobility is not good. And so I can't say it's a never play option, but it's a bad tank, and you could be better served by almost any other choice. The Rahmenpanzer is basically the German 59 Patton, and it's awful. Don't play it unless you're a masochist. The Mutz, no armor, decent mobility, so right away, it shouldn't be in never play it, but it's not a good choice, and I would rather play a Panther 8.8 centimeter, because at least I'm getting better damage per minute with the Panther. The Kampfpanzer. This thing would probably go up higher if the TVP 100 didn't exist. However, if you like the mobility damage per minute playstyle that the Kampfpanzer provides, you'd be just better served with the TVP 100. Still, this is great in a lot of different scenarios. You can do a lot of interesting things with it, and so I think this is great in most places. The Jagdtiger 8.8 centimeter, it's got great damage per minute. Everything else about the tank just sucks in today's meta, and in Frontline, it's so slow that you should never play this thing. The Scorpion G. This might be controversial to a few people. I think some would be tempted to put it in decent alternatives or great in some spots. I think the Scorpion G provides almost everything you want in Frontline. You have mobility, you have damage at range, you got a very nice accurate gun, you've got fantastic alpha damage and good high penetration. If you want to fire only AP in Frontline, then the Scorpion G is going to earn you a ton of credits, and so I'm going to say this is great in most places. I can't put it in completely overpowered because it can't make game-winning pushes on its own, but in terms of just farming credits lazily in the back, this is an amazing choice, and it's great in most places. The Kanonen Jagdpanzer and the Kanonen Jagdpanzer 105 don't have turrets like the Scorpion G. Their mobility, I'm going to say it's roughly the same. They both can get to a pretty high top speed. Sure, these things can probably putt around a little bit faster, but if you're going to have no armor, then you may as well have an excellent gun. And so the Scorpion G, it's great in most places. The Kanonen Jagdpanzer, it's got a pathetic gun. You should never play it. And the Kanonen Jagdpanzer 105, it's bad. It's not a great choice, and you should pick something else. The Jagdtiger prototype suffers from many of the same things as the Jagdtiger 8.8. It's slow, but its gun is better, and so that's going to put it in bad instead of never play it. Still, slow tanks do poorly in Frontline, and you don't want to play them. The Alf Klaringspanzer 5. This tank, very rare. Very few people own this. I believe maybe 3,000 people on a North American server. And with that said, it's a light tank. It's got some mobility, but it's one of the slower lights in the game. You could ram things, but you'd rather not because that's going to take a lot of your own hit points out of the equation. And so I hesitate to say it's bad because it's got mobility, but this is probably one of the weakest light tanks. I could be corrected. I'm sure some players can make this work, but it's so rare, and it's not a tank that I personally own, that I'm going to leave it as a decent alternative. The HWK-30 is a decent choice. It's got better mobility than the Alf Klaringspanzer, but just doesn't have the firepower that some of the other light tanks do later on. And so it's a decent choice. I think it's better than the M41D, but nothing to write home about. The Lef M4190 is just the M41D, but it has a 90mm, so it hits a lot harder than the 150 average damage pea shooter that the M41D has. And it's got fantastic high explosive rounds, so this is a very good choice. I think this is going to rise up. I could see you wanting to play this over something like a Skoda. However, if you want phenomenal mobility and a much better gun, you should just play a Barask or maybe a Kampfpanzer, and so it can't rise above decent alternative. The Vipera is a good tank in the random queue. It holds a position really firmly, but it's so slow, and slowness really hurts a lot of these tanks. I think you could make this work in a few scenarios, and the gun's powerful enough and the armor is really good to where I hesitate to put it down below decent alternatives. You could make it work in some spots. I'm going to stick it at the top of decent alternatives because it's useful, but too slow to make a huge impact on your games. The Progetto 46 is not actually a tank that I love. I should play it more, but in the random queue, I find it just feels like an inferior Barask. However, in Frontline, the ability to have that auto reloader where you can maximize your damage per minute all across the board is really, really useful. I still favor the Barask. I think 720 alpha damage in 2 seconds is just better than what the Progetto can output, but the ability to have sustained fire really does move this up the list. I should also add that with all of these mobile tanks, you're able to hit healing stations and resupply stations much more often. And so where the Progetto suffers from things like its limited ammunition loadout, you can hit supply depots constantly, top up your ammunition, and that doesn't become a factor. So the Progetto 46, not one of my personal favorite tanks, but I think it is in the overpowered tier for Frontline in particular. The Byzante, really good armor, decent mobility for a heavy tank, and where your damage per minute can really, really suffer if you fire all of your shells out, it's still such a good well-rounder that I'm going to say it's great in some spots. I think the Samua is going to be better at outputting a bunch of damage very quickly, but the Byzante, really good tank overall, and it's great in some spots. The Type 63, one of the newly released Christmas loot boxes. This tank is great at range, and that's something that's very valuable in this game mode, but its rate of fire is pretty poor. Its damage per minute is very lackluster, and because of this, I think you could make it work in plenty of situations, but I'm going to put it as a decent alternative. It's a well-rounded heavy tank that just lacks damage per minute to really do what you want in Frontline. The Type 5 Kari has decent mobility, decent armor, a really powerful gun, and so where I would prefer to have the better mobility of the Scorpion G, I don't think you can go wrong with Type 5 Kari, and so I'm going to say this is at the top of great in some spots because it's very useful all the time. The STA-2, it's got okay mobility, it doesn't have paper armor, but it's pretty close, and the gun's just a 90mm that hits for 240 alpha. If you're going to hit for 240, you may as well have an autoloader, and so this has to be below, at the very least, the Skoda T27. Honestly, this is a tank that just feels like it's been completely forgotten. I'm going to stick it next to the Mutts and leave it there as a bad tank. The 50 TP prototype, on the other hand, is a bit like the Polish Defender. It's a good tank. It can do a bunch of things that you like, but it's slow and it's not a great option, and so I'm going to stick it into decent alternatives. Oh my goodness. The Skoda T64, I think. This one was released in part of a battle pass, and I may even be butchering its name because this tank is just such a nothing burger. Its armor isn't good, its mobility isn't good, its gun is bad, it's got poor damage per minute. If you bought this, I'm sorry that Wargaming suckered you. If you earned it through the battle pass, I'm sorry that you had to play so much World of Tanks to unlock this pathetic tank. I hesitate to say it's as bad as a Kanonen Jagdpanzer, but wow, it's awful. So, bottom of bad. Pick a better tank. The CS52 Lys, on the other hand, is a good tank. It's a well-rounded tank with armor, a decent gun, decent mobility. There's nothing awful about it, and there's nothing great about it. And so this is a tank that's great in some spots and absolutely deserves to be one of your choices. The Lansen C, I think, has better mobility than the CS52 Lys. You're sacrificing perhaps a little bit of armor, especially on the whole, but still a really great choice. It's got solid damage per minute, and so I think this is great in some spots. I should play my Lansen C more in this game mode because it's excellent gun, depression, angles will allow you to work a lot of different spots that the CS52 list isn't quite as good at maximizing. The STRV-81, on the other hand, lacks the alpha damage that the Lance NC has, and where it has good turret armor, it's really slow, and so this is a decent alternative. You could get use out of it, but there are many, many better options. The Emil 1951 is a good tank. It's not one that I own, but I've played the regular Emil time and time again. The Emil 1951 is actually the original reward for playing a bunch of Frontlines. For those who played constantly, they were able to earn this tank for completely free. Ever since then, this has paroled around the game as a Swedish heavy tank with great gun depression, a pretty solid turret, especially at tier 8, and of course its auto loader. This is a good choice and useful in many scenarios. However, when you're stuck reloading, you're really going to regret not being in a single shot tank, and so I'm going to say this is great in some spots, and I'm going to leave it at the bottom of that tier. The Tornvon, of course it's great if you're hull down, but its damage output is so bad and it's so slow. In a mode like Frontline, it's usable, but it's not a great choice, and I'd personally rather be in something like a Type 63, so I'm going to throw this into the bottom of decent alternatives. The STRV S1, recall that mobility and long-range fire are absolutely critical in a game mode like this. This thing has really good mobility, it's got okay armor depending on what's shooting at you, and it's got a really, really good gun. This thing is accurate at long range, and you've got phenomenal penetration. You don't need to even load APCR gold shells in this tank, and because of this, I think it's great in some spots. It'll earn you a bunch of credits. It's not going to carry your games, but it's awesome at farming the enemy as they push into you. The Carnarvon Action 10. Really low damage per shot, especially for a heavy tank, and its mobility is not very good, but its armor is solid and the damage per minute is very good, and the ability to connect your shots with some reliability is valuable. And so I think this hesitates to be a great choice, but it's towards the top of the decent alternatives and absolutely a tank that you should consider playing in the right scenario. The Caliban. Oh my goodness, the Caliban. I love this tank. It's so funny. But it's the worst tank out of all of these at range. I believe its HE shell has around 350 meters per second shell velocity. That means if you were to shoot in a Brask at 1,000 meters, it's going to take 1 second for your shell to hit. If you're shooting in a Caliban, it's going to take about 3 seconds for your shell to land where you aimed it. This thing is useless at range, and because of that, it's really useless in Onslaught. However, it's more fun than these tanks. At least it has something going for it. And if you want to get right behind a few of your opponents in a few of the scenarios where that's possible, you could have some fun. You're going to die pretty quickly, but it's got some mobility, it's got a fun gun, and everybody will love you for playing the Caliban. If you get hit for 900 damage from a Caliban, you can't even be mad because he outplayed you. So it's bad, but I'm going to stick at the top of bad because at least it's fun. The Gonzalo, on the other hand, really benefits from Frontline's matchmaking. The Gonzalo doesn't have gold shells, the typical gold shells. Instead, it has Hesh. So you don't get high penetration rounds, but you do get extra alpha damage Hesh rounds. And because of that, the Gonzalo is able to farm against tier 8 opponents all day. And so where I think this is a decent choice in the regular queue, I actually think it gets a buff overall. And so I'm going to say this is great in some spots. I've absolutely been terrified running into some Gonzalos. When they fire their Hesh rounds, they will just farm your hit points much more quickly than any heavy tank has a right to do. And so this is a good choice all around. Taking a look at the Charlemagne, very few people have this. Perhaps more do after the Onslaught game mode just wrapped up its second season. And the Charlemagne is a bit like the British Defender. However, one thing that people don't know about the Charlemagne is it has really bad shell velocity, and so this makes this tank really bad at firing at range. And because of that, that's an indirect nerf in the Frontline game mode. You get less brawling scenarios in this game than you would in some others. I value the ability to shoot at range much more in this game mode than any other, and so I'm going to say that the Charlemagne, it's not a terrible tank, but it's not a great choice either, and I'm going to stick it towards the bottom of the decent alternatives. The Chieftain T95 is a tank that's really lost to time. It's a medium tank that you probably haven't seen very often. It's not a very good choice, but it's not the worst thing in the game. And I'm going to stick it at the bottom of bad. Moving the whatever this thing is a little lower because it's just sad and pathetic. The Centurion 5-1 suffers pretty much from all the problems the SRV-81 has. It's a decent choice. You can use your gun, but it's got pathetic alpha damage and lackluster mobility, leaving it in the middle of decent choices. The G-Sword 1010 is not an amazing tank in the random queue. It's got low damage per minute, and that's definitely going to hurt it in this game mode. However, having good mobility and a reasonably snipey gun, it's got some good dispersion values, means that this is not a bad choice in Frontline. It's not the best of the medium tanks, but it is usable. And so I'm going to slide this towards the top of decent alternatives because I think you could get a lot of use out of 360 alpha and good mobility. The FE4202 is very similar to something like the Centurion lines. However, if you wanted to play a 230, 240 alpha medium tank, you may as well just play a Centurion or an SDRV-81. So I'm going to slide this into bad, and it's not as fun as the Caliban, so let's just slide it lower. At least the Panther has some damage per minute, and this is just too boring to play. The FV-1066 Senlac is basically a carbon copy, not necessarily in function or form as the M41D, but it's a low alpha light tank, and there's nothing to write home about. It's got enough mobility to be a decent choice, but it's not a good one. The Charioteer Nomad, one of the recent additions to the game, has a lot of things that are really important in this game mode. It has mobility. It has a gun that can snipe. The gun is just not as accurate as you would like it to be, as you expect it to be, especially because if you move, your dispersion blooms out massively. Still, mobility and the ability to snipe is incredibly valuable in this game mode. Add on to that the fact that you can fire Hesh in this thing allows you to just farm tier 8s all over the place. 210 millimeters of Hesh penetration is enough to frontally penetrate a huge number of these tanks in this list, and so it makes the Charioteer Nomad better in this game mode than it would be in the random queue. And because of that, I'm going to stick it in great in most places. And if you picked one up for very cheap in the recent Battle Pass, you should be absolutely excited to roll this out on the battlefield. The G-Sword is actually a tank I've been experimenting with a lot more recently. I think this is really powerful in the random queue because you got to pick your moments. However, being on reload for 40 seconds in the middle of Frontline is just devastating, and you only get 1200 damage out of that. And so, where it is usable, I don't think it's a very good choice, and so I'm going to stick it in the middle of decent alternatives. You would be better served in something that isn't on reload for half a minute at a time. The Turtle. The Turtle is so strong in today's meta. If you're playing in the random queue, then this tank will just rip you apart. But it's slow, and as you might see, one of the more common themes in these great choices options is that they have mobility, and the Turtle has none. And so where this would probably be in the great choices or completely overpowered for the random queue list, this tank overall is only a decent alternative. It's very good in the scenarios where you can set up and create an ambush, but if you have to attack your enemy or cross open land or just chase up to get to the regular fight, the Turtle is not a good option, and so it's going to be next to the Vipera. Good tank, bad scenario in this game mode. The Chrysler K, similarly, very slow, an amazing side scraper, and its poor penetration is hurt a lot less in this game mode. However, because it's nothing exceptional to write home about outside of its side scraping potential, this is going to go into the bad choices. We can also remember this as the tank that nearly killed Sir Foch, and at least it's memorable for that. The M4Y is not an amazing tank, but it's a decent all-rounder, and I think you'll find that this, with its gun depression, its decent mobility, and its decent armor, is very usable in this game mode. I think, because of its well-rounded nature, it deserves to be towards the bottom of great in some spots, because it's going to be very good in a lot of scenarios. It won't be the best. I'd rather be in multiple other heavy tanks throughout this list, but it's still a good choice. The Renegade, by contrast, is very similar to the M4Y, but just better. I think this is a great choice, one of the best heavy tanks in the game for Frontline. It's got mediocre penetration overall, but that doesn't matter when you're only facing tier 8s, and it has the ability to snipe at range. It's got a really flexible, fun gun. It's not a tank I roll out a ton in, but it's probably one I should utilize more, and so I'm going to slide this up a little bit. And while I'm at it, I'm going to move the WZ lower in the tier list, and the Conf Panzer are probably a little higher on up. The T-32, I said no tech-free vehicles. I could not find a good image for the T-832, and so this is my substitute. The T-832 is a very good tank overall. It's fantastic in its use case scenario. However, it's got relatively low damage per minute, and so it really is just a decent choice. I could absolutely see why you'd want to play it over low. You're going to have gun depression, a better turret, but it's still not the best option, and so the T-832 deserves to be about here. The TS-54, on the other hand, one of my new loves. If you have Watt Plus, you will be overjoyed to know that this tank has mobility, it has armor, and the double shot mechanic is fantastic. I think this is an amazing choice in Frontline. I would probably consider it better than a BZ-176. You're going to have really good damage per minute. Your low penetration doesn't really matter in this game mode, and you've got so many opportunities to go hold down. Combine that with just decent overall mobility, and this tank is a fantastic all-rounder. I can't quite put it up and is certainly or completely overpowered, but I think this is a fantastic choice. And in fact, I'm going to change my mind. This is my list. I think this thing is amazing, and so I'm going to slide it up right next to the Skoda T56 because it's just got the mobility to compete everywhere you want it to. By contrast, the M6A2E1 Mutant, this was never supposed to be sold and should have been exclusive to beta testers. I have a weird story about this one. I own this tank. I played a few games in it. I have no idea how. I never bought it. I don't think it was gifted to me. I think Wargaming probably had a coding issue, accidentally gifted me the Mutant, and where it's better, I think, than I would have expected, it's not a good choice, and so I'm going to stick it towards the bottom of bad. The T26E5 Patriot, on the other hand, does pretty much everything that the T832 does well, and I like having a good gun with alpha damage. It's not an amazing tank, but it's very useful. And the fact you can buy this for bonds makes it incredible for the free-to-play player. The T-34 was one of my original loves in this game. It's one of my most played tanks, although I don't think I've played it in years. It's got poor mobility, it's got awful damage per minute, and it's a bad tank. You don't want to play this one. Choose a better choice. The T-77 suffers from the same things that the G-SOR has, and I believe it's less accurate. It's got really bad damage per minute, and you're going to be sitting out of fights for up to 40-45 seconds at a time. And because of that, this is just at the bottom of decent alternatives. Yes, it's fun when you're firing. It's just boring as heck to sit on the sidelines for 45 seconds and watch the game pass you by. The Astron Rex. This is a tank that I think probably needs more conversation, and I need to play more. It's a good choice. It's low, really low penetration, doesn't matter as much in a game mode like Frontline. However, the 4-second interclip is just a little bit painful to play, and so with an asterisk that I need to try this a little more, I'm going to stick it in the bottom of great in some spots because I could see a good player just absolutely able to farm in this thing, and I will probably look to do that later in the week. The AMBT, on the other hand, I have played a decent bit of. It's not amazing. Its damage per minute is a little lower than you would like, but it's a good all-rounder with decent gun depression, decent armor, and that 3-second interclip, or is it 2.7-second interclip, really allows you to do 360 alpha damage times 3 very quickly in those desperate case scenarios. Its low damage per minute really keeps it from going higher on this list, but it's still a good choice, and I would rather play this over a whole host of other vehicles. The TL1 LPC, there's just nothing to talk about with this tank. If you want a generic medium, play a better one. and I'm going to stick this towards the middle of bad with all these other random generic medium tanks that have no real armor to write home about, no fantastic guns, and they're just something for you to shoot. It's a punching bag on the battlefield. The M46 Patton KR is exactly the same as all the rest. This is the tier of medium tanks that you just never want to be in because you'll get farmed, and I love facing these things on the battlefield. The M47 Iron Arnie, on the other hand, does have something notable. It's got great armor. Although its damage per minute is not amazing, it's still a good choice. And so I'm going to say this is great in some spots. It's able to hold a flank. It's got gun depression. It's a really, really strong tank. It's a little boring to play, but it's a great option, especially for those who own it. The T42 gets slapped in the middle of generic medium tanks. I'll say it's better perhaps than the Panther 8.8 centimeter, but these are all the same in my eyes. They do the exact same thing, and they do it poorly. The Super Pershing actually does have armor, so it's not quite the same as the generic medium tanks. However, it's only got 240 alpha damage, it's slow, and in Frontline that means it's even worse than the options ahead of it, and it goes into the middle of bad. The T25 Pilot, I'm not even sure if this is a different tank than the M46 Patton. Maybe it's a skin, maybe it's not. I don't care enough to know, because this is just something for you to shoot when you're in your Barask or in your Samua or in your Type 63. The T92 suffers from all the same problems as the Senlac and the M41D. It's got no alpha damage. It's really a pathetic gun. With its mobility, you can do some interesting things, but that's the only good thing about this tank in the Frontline game mode, and it's only a decent alternative. The XM66F, on the other hand, it is slow, but it's got some armor, and it's got a really punchy gun. This thing has great damage per minute, and so because of that, I am willing to move this up higher than the Turtle or the Vipera. I think it's got better mobility than those tanks. The flexibility with the turret is really useful, and that damage per minute is just so good overall. So I'm going to stick this towards the bottom of grade in some spots because I can see this being very useful in a lot of different scenarios. The TS5 is very similar to the Turtle, always has been. The TS5 has normally been regarded as the better tank. However, this has worse accuracy at range than the Turtle, and it's just about as slow. So I'm going to stick the Turtle, the TS5, and the Vipera, very similar in function, and they belong towards the top of decent alternatives. If this is holding a point, it's going straight to completely overpowered, but if you're in the normal gameplay, you're going to have scenarios where you're just behind the fight, and it's going to suck, and it's going to be boring. The IS-3A, its mobility, still weak, but the option to unload your clip 3 shots into your opponents in about, give or take, 6 seconds is really powerful. That's about 1200 damage. And then you're a reverse auto reloader, so you get to put out your 4th shell about 10 or so seconds after the 3rd. And so this tank is honestly should be mentioned more. It's a powerful one. It's just not one you see all the time. And so I'm going to stick it towards the bottom of great in some spots. Compare that to the IS-5, and this is just a generic heavy tank for me. You've got a lot of better options. I'd rather have gun depression from something like a Patriot or something else, and even the T-77 at least has the autoloader that, while slow, brings some entertainment value to this. I'm going to stick this in with the generic heavy tanks that can side scrape. Maybe it's a little bit better, but you've got so many other better options. The IS-6, similarly, it's got some decent troll armor, but this thing was way better a decade ago. Now it's just an old has-been, and I'm going to stick it right in with the WZ-111 and the 112. The KV-4 Krez Slamsky. I actually don't know what this tank is, and I cannot recall ever seeing one on the opposing team. So, because of that, I think I've seen some stats from it. I can't quite recall. I'm going to stick this in it's a slow heavy tank that can't really do anything, and it's bad choice. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comment section. I just don't know enough about this tank. I've never played it to actually inform myself. The KV-5 at least has the fun of ramming. It's got decent damage per minute overall, and so while it's not an amazing choice, you can find some utility out of it, and so I'm going to stick it towards the bottom of decent alternatives. Plus, if you get to go downhill and ram something, my goodness, you're going to have a lot of fun. The Object 7032, this is a good tank. In fact, if this was a regular ranking, this would go higher. But it is slow, and while it's got really nice gun handling, its accuracy at range is still not very good. And because of this, I am going to stick it with IS-3A and great in some spots, but not completely overpowered like it would be in other scenarios. The Object 252U, the Defender, is a great tank, and definitely was much better back in the day. However, now in the Frontline game mode, it's just slow, and it doesn't have the gun depression of something like a Carnarvon Action 10. So I'm going to say this belongs with its 50 TP brother, and because that has gun depression and this doesn't, this is going to go in just a little bit lower of decent alternatives. The Object 274A, not an amazing medium tank, but very usable. I think this is very much on the Lanson or the CS52 range of tanks, and I'm going to stick it right around this level. You'll notice my top choices have mobility, and even though the Object 274A is not my favorite tank, you can get a lot of use out of it. It's not fast enough to be amazing, but it's a good tank with good damage per minute, and you'll find a lot of utility in this game mode. The Obsidian. The Obsidian has really pathetic alpha damage, only 200 per shot. It's got decent, it has good damage per minute. It fires quickly, and you can rack up damage that way. And if you can penetrate HE, then you're really going to be cooking. However, whereas the Companzer has awesome high explosive penetration, the Obsidian has terrible high explosive penetration. It's slower than a Companzer, and maybe it has slightly better armor, but it's nothing to write home about. This tank, for those who picked it up for free, and it was quite easy to pick up for free if you were playing one of Wargaming's events earlier in the year. This tank it's good. It's a great tribute to the Murney 13 event, but I can't say it's better than a decent alternative, and I think a lot of the other tanks above it provide better value, so I'm going to stick it right around the Type 59's level. The STG. This is a tank that can snipe at range, good for it. However, it doesn't provide much more than that. It's got good alpha damage, but there are many, many better alternatives. This is not a bad tank, and I don't think that you can completely write it off, but it's not better than a decent alternative. The T-44-100, similarly, it's got some armor, it's got some mobility, it's got lackluster alpha damage. It's a decent choice, and I think it belongs around the Type 59. However, it can't be said to be much better than the options above it. It's just not unique enough gameplay to set it apart from the pack. The T-54 Mod 1, I'm going to stick in just identical with the T-44-100. They operate the exact same use case scenario, and they're a decent choice, but not an amazing one. The ISU-130, very few people will ever have this tank. This, I believe, was given out to developers, and I can't recall it ever being sold. Maybe it's been sold once. This tank, because of the chassis, it's just so slow and inflexible. It's not a good choice. It's got a good gun, but not much more than that. And so I'm going to stick this towards the bottom of bad. I think having a turret and some mobility would be a lot more useful than playing in this thing. And identically, the ISU-152K, which is hilarious when it hits for 750 alpha damage, sucks at range. It's got awful accuracy, it's slow, and it's basically identical to a Jagdtiger in purpose, and so it's a bad choice. The KV-4 KTTS, it has a surprisingly good gun, but it's so slow. Its chassis is just incredibly inflexible that it's got the exact same problems as the Jagdtiger. And you should be noticing they're just archetypes of tanks in this list. We have right here generic light tanks, not much to separate. We have right here, we've got generic heavy tanks, we've got generic medium tanks, generic slow immobile tank destroyers. In fact, let me move that slightly up because it's got accuracy. These types of tanks don't do well. If you don't have an amazing gun, or even a usable gun like these tanks, you're not going to be great. If you don't have any notable armor or mobility, like these tanks all struggle from, you're not going to be good in this game mode. If you're completely slow, even a good gun isn't going to allow you to overtake better options ahead of you. With that said, SU-130 PM, this is not just a generic tank destroyer. It's very similar to something like a Scorpion G, but it's got mobility, and it's got a gun that's accurate enough to hit the shots at range. The Scorpion G is more accurate, and I think the Scorpion G has better top speed, so I'd rather play a Scorpion, but the SU-130 is a good choice, and it's great in most places. The T-103, really you could operate this as sort of a heavy tank. It's not a terrible option, but it's not a great one either. And so I'm going to stick this towards the top of bad. If you're a free-to-play player and you pick this up for bonds, you should be happy. It's very usable, but it's so slow that it's not a great option for this mode. The ISU 122-2, I don't think this is a good tank. I still have to upload a replay from this one to the channel, in which I do around 5,000, 6,000 damage. This can be fun, and my goodness, doubling shells is absolutely addicting. However, it's inflexible. It doesn't have good armor. It doesn't have good mobility. It's got decent mobility, and the gun is not completely accurate. This is fun. It's got a purpose. It's got a reason to exist, like the Caliban. So I'm going to stick this towards the top of bad. Being a Caliban lover, I'm going to stick the Caliban just a little bit higher, but still, ISU 122-2, you've got a reason to play it. 1 game in 100 and have some fun with it. The LT-432, this is going to be my last tank of the video. And this thing it's going to be great in most places or completely overpowered. This is not as good of a scout as the ELC Even 90. The ELC is just a better scout, but this thing is much better at doing damage. It's got a very good rate of fire. It's got decent damage per minute, and you have high explosive shells. One strategy you can do in the LT-432 is that once the game unlocks, once you cap the second level of objectives, you have access to shoot the artillery batteries, and all of the artillery batteries have significant weak spots that you can high explosive down. The LT-432 can do 300 alpha damage with HE, and that means you're doing 300 alpha damage every 4 seconds. That is 40, check my math, that's about 4,500 damage per minute in a light tank of all tanks. And the LT-432 is very fast, has very good top speed, and pretty troll and decent armor, which means you can play in this tank and get a lot of different things done. Once that second level of defense has been breached, you can zoom in this thing, try to cross the map to the farthest objective you can find, and you can melt entire objectives down by yourself. If you pop the Inspire ability alongside that, your rate of fire gets even better, and this thing is really, really powerful in a few use case scenarios. I think, right along with the EBR-75, this is the best frontline light tank, and because light tanks are very good, as a general rule, or at least I should say mobility is very good, that I'm going to move this right here towards above the heavy tanks. And with the LT-432 placed, we've picked all of the tier 8 premium tanks that I could think of. As you can see, having a good gun absolutely helps. Something like the Scorpion, like the SU-130 PM, like the Renegade or the Kampfpanzer. These tanks have good guns. They've got high damage per minute that are very, very useful. Mobility, having mobility and a good gun, or mobility and burst damage, just puts you in S tier. The Barask, incredible burst damage and great mobility. It's the best tank in this game mode. The TVP-100 has really good mobility, and it's got, I think, the best damage per minute on this list, especially when you factor in its high explosive rounds. The EBR-75 FL-10, this thing has the best mobility on this entire list, and it allows you to do a lot of different things that you can't do in other tanks. The Progetto 46, it's got less burst damage than the other tanks, but it's more flexible, and it's very, very useful in this game mode. The LT-432, fantastic mobility. It does pretty much what the EBR-75 does, just to a bit of a lesser extent, but the armor allows you to win some one-on-one engagements that you wouldn't have the ability to win in something like an EBR. The Skoda T56 and the TS54, if you want to play something with armor, these things have enough mobility to be useful, enough armor to go hold down, and really, really excellent guns overall. With that said, Have a great time in Frontlines. You can make a lot of credits. It's one of my personal favorite events that Wargaming does. I would love to see Frontlines once a month, and if I had to change the mode at all, my recommendation would be to Wargaming. Let us have Frontlines once a month, or maybe you say every Monday or every weekend. Let us play Frontlines more because it's a really fun game mode, and it's not stressful. There's no stats being held. You can do what you want. Winning and losing isn't the all-in that it might be in the random queue or like Onslaught. It's relaxing. It's a good time. I can sit back, pop on some music, pop on a podcast, and know that nothing I do is going to have a huge impact one way or the other. Yes, you can make game-winning plays, but more often than not, you're going to play, make credits, and move on with your day. And that's a really pleasant experience. With that said, please think about subscribing to the channel. These type of videos take a lot longer than a lot of my regular form replay videos. It's been a pleasure talking about these tanks, thinking on them. I love Tier 8. Yes, it's pay to win, absolutely. But there's a lot of different unique gameplay and game styles in these tanks, and it's something I've thought a decent bit about. So if you would, drop a like, drop a subscription, and wait and see what's coming up on the channel soon. Once we get to 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to be holding a giveaway, giving away gold, giving away premium tanks, at least one, hopefully more in the future, and I would love to see you there. With that said, I'm Lad, and I'm out.